My girlfriend Charlotte and I were driving to the Pocono Mountains for a weekend getaway. We had rented a cozy-looking Airbnb, beautifully decorated for Christmas. It had a picturesque view, a spacious property, and was conveniently close to a charming little village. To add to the festive atmosphere, a snowstorm was expected that night, so we set out early to stock up on groceries and settle in before the weather turned. The drive from the city to the Poconos took about 4 hours. We made good time, stopping briefly at a Family Dollar for snacks and essentials before heading straight to the Airbnb. The house sat at the end of a winding uphill gravel road, nestled deep within the woods. A large deck wrapped around the front, complete with a hot tub, which sounded perfect for a snowy night. Christmas decorations filled the yard, twinkling reindeer, a cheerful snowman, and candy cane lights lining the walkway. The first impression was exactly what we had hoped for, warm and inviting. Inside, a Christmas tree stood in the corner, stockings hung on the walls, and a welcoming scent of wood lingered in the air. The house itself was more of a rustic cabin-style home, with 3 bedrooms, though we only needed 1. We dropped our luggage in the second bedroom and took in the space. I did the usual routine check to fridge, flipped through television channels, and glanced out the windows. The loft upstairs housed a pool table and some couches, while the basement remained largely unfinished, cold, dark, and uninviting, meant more for storage and laundry than leisure. As I explored, a sudden knock at the front door startled me. I answered it to find a man in his late 40s, dressed in gray sweatpants and a tattered, yellowish-brown jacket. He smiled and greeted me, asking how we were settling in. Assuming he was the host, I asked if he ran the Airbnb. He nodded, introducing himself as Tom, and mentioned that he and his brother managed the property. He added that he lived just up the road if we needed anything. I thanked him, but something about the way he spoke unsettled me. He knew I was with my girlfriend, even though Charlotte hadn't come to the door. Maybe the actual host, Mike, had mentioned it. I tried to shake off the feeling. By nightfall, the snowstorm had arrived. We cranked up the heat and prepared dinner: chicken thighs, broccoli, potatoes, and cornbread. The Christmas tree lights cast a cozy glow as we watched The Polar Express, the only decent Christmas movie available. Afterward, we turned on the outdoor lights and slipped into the hot tub, watching the snowfall. It felt perfect until the jets abruptly shut off, leaving us in eerie silence. Then we heard footsteps. Not the crunch of an animal in the snow, these were deliberate, human steps. Charlotte and I exchanged uneasy glances. I whispered, asking if I should call out. She gripped my arm and shook her head. The footsteps continued, then faded into the distance. I forced a chuckle, saying it was probably a deer. But deep down, I knew better. Later, in the shower, the hot water vanished within minutes, turning ice cold. We yelped and scrambled out. I messaged Mike about the issue, and he responded 30 minutes later, saying he'd send someone in the morning to check the water heater. Frustrated but exhausted, we climbed into bed. Sometime in the middle of the night, loud, aggressive bangs echoed through the house. Charlotte gripped my arm, her whole body trembling. I started to get up, but she yanked me back, whispering frantically for me to stay put. I was relieved. She stopped me. Every part of me dreaded finding out who was at the door. The banging continued 3 heavy, deliberate knocks before stopping. We sat upright, barely breathing. I got up to quietly lock the bedroom door. We whispered in the dark, adrenaline keeping us awake until exhaustion eventually pulled us under. At dawn, I messaged Mike again. He seemed genuinely confused, saying no one should have been outside at that hour. If it happened again, he suggested calling the police. Not the most comforting advice, but what else could he say? Stepping outside to brush snow off my Jeep, I noticed something that made my stomach turn. Footprints. They circled the house. These weren't last night's, they were fresh. It had snowed all night, which meant these were recent. Someone had been out here this morning. As I processed this, I heard footsteps approaching. Tom emerged from behind my car. He greeted me casually, asking about the water heater. I mentioned it, and he nodded, saying he was there to fix it. I hesitated, then told him about the knocks at the door and the footprints in the snow. He glanced at them and shrugged. Yeah, strange folks out here. They just snoop around sometimes, he said. I asked if we should avoid using the hot tub at night, and he chuckled. Nah, they're harmless. Something about his casual tone unnerved me.
It was Christmas Eve in 1997, and I was just 7 years old. Since my family is Jewish, Christmas didn't mean anything to use. It was just another night. My dad, a doctor, was always on call during Christmas, so that night he wasn't home. That left just me and my little brother alone in the house. Technically, our mom was home, but she was a heavy drinker. Back then, I didn't understand what alcoholism was. All I knew was that every evening, once the sun went down, she'd pass out, and no matter how much we shook her, she wouldn't wake up. My brother and I were watching television when there was a knock on the door. Being the older sibling, I went to check. Our front door had glass panels, and when I looked through them, I saw a man standing outside in a Santa suit, holding a sack. When he saw me, he smiled and waved, motioning for me to open the door. I hesitated. Why would Santa come to our house, of all places? The man spoke. Hey kid, it's me, Santa. Open up. I've got presents for you. I frowned. Santa isn't real, and even if he was, he doesn't give gifts to Jewish kids. The man chuckled. Oh, but I've changed the rules this year. I felt bad that Jewish kids never get presents, so now I give them out to everyone. Something felt off. His smile seemed too forced, his voice too eager. I shook my head. We already get presents for Hanukkah, I said, my voice firm. The man's expression darkened instantly. The friendly act dropped. His voice grew rough. Open the door. My stomach twisted. I turned to my brother. Call 911, I whispered. The man must have heard, because suddenly he bolted. We called the cops, but the operator didn't take us seriously. I guess she thought we were just kids excited about Santa. She told us this line was for emergencies only, then hung up. My brother and I were terrified. We had no one to call. It was the 90s. Our dad didn't have a cell phone yet, and we didn't know the hospital's number. Our mom was dead to the world. We were on our own. And then the knocking came again. Harder this time. I know the cops aren't coming. The man hissed through the door. So open up or you're gonna regret it. My brother ran upstairs, shaking our mom, begging her to wake up. But I knew it was useless. I had to do something. Then, an idea hit me. I grabbed a handful of menorah candles, lit them all at once, then ran underneath the smoke detector. I blew them out quickly, sending a cloud of smoke up to the alarm. Within seconds, the piercing siren rang through the house. I prayed it would work, that it would alert the fire department. I got lucky. A station was only a few blocks away and they arrived fast. But the man didn't run. Number? He walked straight to the firefighters, smiling. Thank God you're here, he exclaimed. I'm their father dressed as Santa to surprise them. My suit doesn't have pockets for my keys and I locked myself out. Please, you have to break the door down. My kids are inside and I think there's a fire. My heart pounded as I saw one of the firefighters getting ready to break in. My brother and I screamed, He's not our dad! We don't know him! Our real dad's at the hospital! Please don't let him in! The firefighter froze, looking between us and the man. You don't celebrate Christmas? He asked. I shook my head, pointing at the menorah. The moment I started crying, everything changed. The firefighter's face hardened. He turned to the man. Why would Santa visit a Jewish home? The man stammered, but the firefighters weren't buying it anymore. Two of them tackled him to the ground while another called the police. An officer stayed with us until our dad rushed home, furious and terrified. He was livid with our mom, but above all, he was relieved that we were safe. The police never told us who the man was or what he wanted. But looking back, I think being Jewish saved our lives. Because if we had opened that door, I don't think we would have lived to see another Hanukkah.
When I was newly single after my 2-year relationship ended, I was back to living alone again and back to swiping on dating apps like Bumble and Hinge. I'd been single for a few months already and met a few people in that time. During that period, I matched with a girl named Sophie on Bumble. She gave me her Instagram, but it quickly fizzled out to her just liking my stories and not really replying to my messages. That kind of thing used to happen all the time when I was in college, but now, being in my late 20s and using these apps, I was starting to feel how immature and pointless it all was. For context, I live in a corner townhome in a small community, and I work as an accountant. It's decent money, but miserably boring. After my ex moved out, I thought I'd enjoy the peace and privacy, but after the first month, the novelty of living alone wore off. I realized I might just be a relationship person, or at least someone who needs people around. That's why I was constantly swiping on apps, looking for someone to talk to, or a reason to get out of the house. This was last December, and I'd posted something Christmas related on my Instagram story. Out of nowhere, Sophie replied to it, even though we hadn't spoken in weeks. She started a conversation about doing Christmas-themed activities together, and from there, we chatted a bit more. I suggested things like ice skating or walking through the Christmas markets, but she proposed decorating my Christmas tree instead. I told her I had a fake tree stored in the attic and hadn't put it up yet since it was kind of a two-person job. She offered to come over and help, and I figured, why not? We made plans for her to come by around 9 p.m. that evening. It was already dark when we finalized the plan, probably around 7:30. I remember rushing out to the liquor store to grab a couple of bottles of wine before heading back home to clean up the place. Ever since my breakup, I'd been realizing how much work it takes to keep a place clean. By 9 p.m., I was sitting upright on the couch, pretending to watch a movie, but really, I was just anxiously waiting. I'd set the place up to feel cozy, with dim lighting and candles. But as the minutes passed, I started to think she might flake. Finally, at 9:30, she messaged saying she was outside. I opened the door, and the first thing I noticed was how tall she was. I'm 5'10", and she was at least a couple of inches taller than me. She was drenched in perfume, to the point where it was overpowering. We sat on the couch, and she sat really close to me, our legs touching. I offered her some wine, and as I poured the glasses, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She looked a bit older than her photos, and there was a faint, unpleasant smell beneath all that perfume. I handed her the wine, and as we clinked glasses, she immediately spilled some on my light blue couch. I felt like screaming but held it together, grabbing a paper towel and sponge to clean it up. She kept apologizing, and I brushed it off, trying to ease the tension. To lighten the mood, I suggested we get the tree from the attic. I climbed up and started handing her the pieces one by one, with the largest section requiring both of us to carry it down. I remember noticing her strength as she effortlessly grabbed the heaviest part. Once we had the tree set up in the living room with Christmas music playing, I poured us more wine. The atmosphere lightened up a bit, and I started to relax. Next, it was time for ornaments. I told her they were in the crawl space and headed down to get them while she stayed in the living room. As I lugged the first bin up, I started feeling woozy, like the wine was hitting me harder than it should have. I've always had a low tolerance, but this felt different. By the time I got to the top of the stairs, Sophie was gone. I called out her name and checked every room, but she was nowhere to be found. I even tried messaging her on Instagram, but she didn't open it. Confused, I sat back down on the couch, still feeling off. I remember periodically checking my phone before everything just went black. When I woke up, the room was pitch dark. The television and lights were off, and I felt disoriented. My limbs were heavy and I could barely move. Grabbing my phone, I turned on the screen, and the light revealed the outline of a tall figure standing in front of me. My heart stopped. I didn't scream, I don't know why, but I managed to whisper, "Sophie?" There was no response. I turned on the flashlight, and it was her, just standing there, staring down at me. I was frozen, unable to move or speak properly. She suddenly turned and sprinted toward the stairs, her footsteps thundering down. I heard the front door slam, and then everything went silent. Slowly, I regained my strength and checked my phone to see she'd blocked me on Instagram. I searched the house, and while most things were untouched, I noticed all my pills were gone of vitamins, supplements, even a bottle of Oxy from an old surgery. She'd taken a bottle of vodka from my mini fridge too. I called the police and gave them all the information I had, including her Instagram username and the name she'd given me, which I'm sure was fake. They checked with my neighbors, but no one had seen anything. After they left, I double-checked that all my doors were locked. Looking back, it's clear she'd laced my wine and used the opportunity to search my house. Her behavior made so much more sense in hindsight. That overpowering perfume was probably to mask body odor, and I'm convinced she was older than she let on and possibly homeless with a drug problem. That silhouette of her standing over me is something I'll never forget. Needless to say, I didn't bother decorating the tree that year.